In this lesson, we're going to get started by importing the files that we'll be using throughout our project and creating our main composition. Before we get started, I'd just like to let you know that Digital Tutors would like to say thank you to iStockPhoto and the artist Forest Bro for their images that were used in this series of lessons. You can access these same images and thousands of others at www.istockphoto.com. Okay, so we're starting off here in your project files in 02_begin, but if you want to, you can go ahead and just open up a blank After Effects project that's going to get you the same amount of information as what I have here. I just have a blank project saved as your start file. And just to get started here, also, I've kind of got the default space set up here, so I'm going to close out some of these panels just so we have a little bit more room, just like that. And now let's get to importing. So I want you to go ahead and open up your reference files folder in your project files like I've done here. And there's a few files here that we're just going to be importing as footage, which means that even if the original Photoshop or Illustrator file had layers, it'll be flattened and we'll just get that basic image. So what we want to import as footage is going to be the bokeh, and then I'm just going to hold Control to select the rest of these files. We'll do cloud 1, 2, 3, the plane path, ship, and train. All of those are going to be brought in as footage, and because they're being brought in as footage, you can simply select and drag them into your project panel in After Effects. Now, the next piece that I want to bring in is going to be imported as a composition, and that's something we haven't talked about yet in these quick start volumes. So when you're importing as a composition, you have the ability to bring something in and preserve those original layers from the file they were created in, and they will be the layers that you see in After Effects on your timeline. So that's pretty cool. It gives you a lot of options for animating without having to save out each individual piece. So let's go ahead and bring that in by coming over to our project panel, right-clicking, and going to Import File. And that's going to open up for you, and you'll want to navigate to your reference files folder just where we were before. And this time I'm going to choose Map. And then we have an option for importing as footage, just as we did with our other files. Whenever you just drag things in, they're going to default to being imported as footage. But if we drop this down, you see we have the option to import as composition, retain layer sizes, or composition. Now let's talk for a second about the difference between retain layer sizes and composition. So if you bring something in as a composition, every single layer that you had in your original file is going to have a bounding box that is the size of your comp. So let's say in Illustrator, my artboard, or if it was in Photoshop, my canvas was 1280 by 720. Every single layer would have a 1280 by 720 bounding box, which makes it really difficult to select layers that are underneath other layers, because even though you see the transparency of that layer, the bounding box extends all the way to the edges. So most of the time I like to choose retain layer sizes, and that's going to make the bounding box of each layer be just a square right around that layer, so it's a lot easier to navigate. So we'll go ahead and choose Composition Retain Layer Sizes and hit Import. And you'll see that this also gives us a slightly different look over in our project panel. Now, instead of seeing the little orange Illustrator icon, we see this other icon over here to the side. And this is the composition icon. So that lets you know that you can actually double click on this and open it up as a composition in After Effects. And then we also have this folder, which is going to contain all of the Illustrator layers. Now, even though they have the Illustrator icon, these are the individual layers that make up that map composition. So that is really beneficial for when we start wanting to animate some of the individual pieces. Okay, so now that that has been brought in, let's create our new composition that's going to basically be our main comp. So we'll come up here to Composition, choose New Composition from the top, and let's call this Main Transportation Composition. And I'm going to have this be 1280 by 720. So if yours doesn't say 1280 by 720, you'll want to go ahead and type that in. If you have trouble typing that in, you can unlock your aspect ratio and then you'll have individual control. If your aspect ratio is locked, one will affect the other. We'll also be working at a frame rate of 24 frames per second because this is a great animation speed, playback speed for something that has this motion graphic look to it. It gives you a really filmic look and looks just really nice. And then our duration right now is only set to 3 seconds, so I'm going to turn that up to about 10. But if we need to make it longer or shorter later on, that's something that's really easy to do. We just need kind of a starting point here. And square pixels also is important for you to have the right aspect ratio of that 16:9. That's what you want it to say there. Okay, so once you have that all set up, go ahead and click OK, and that's going to open up your main composition here for you. And we can't see anything in it. It's black right now because nothing has been brought in, but we do have the composition over here. Now, let's do one last thing where we organize our project panel. So to do this, we're going to right click over here and click New Folder. And let's make a folder called Graphics. And this is what's going to contain anything that is a graphic. So we can Shift select all of these Photoshop files and place them in the Graphics folder just by clicking and dragging. And we'll do the same thing, Shift select for our Illustrator files. And then I'm also going to put my map layers into that folder. So it almost acts as a subfolder because that folder contains graphics as well. Now let's make one more folder. So right click, go to New Folder, and we'll call this one Compositions. Or if you want to abbreviate it, you could just call it Comps. That'd be okay too. And we'll Shift select these and place them in Compositions. And that's just going to help to maintain organization over here in your project panel, kind of keep everything together where that makes sense. And if you wanted to add audio to this later on, you could add another folder and put your audio clips in there. Just if you wanted to kind of go above and beyond. So definitely is good to keep that project panel organized. Okay, so now we've pretty much got everything set up for beginning our project. And in our next lesson, we're going to bring in our map composition and start to kind of look at some of the transformation properties. We talked about this a little bit in our last course in the volume 1 of the Quick Start, but now we're really going to start getting into understanding what those transformation properties do, and we'll be doing lots of animation using those. So stick around and we'll get started building our composition and learning about transformation properties in the next lesson.